Welcome to the Startup Grind.
All right, we're good.
Well, I'd love to start at the beginning. How did you all meet? Where did you meet each other?
Business school.
Is that right?
That's right.
In class, same class, or on?
That's a long story. Yes, we were in the same class, and it was not an auspicious start.
I didn't do well.
In the class or with Amy?
Well, probably both, to be honest with you, but
I switched into a business school class after they had set the seating chart, and I ended up next to him. We spoke 2 words the entire class, or maybe it was a few more. It's, "Do you ever take notes?" And his answer was no.
And that was it.
she was intrigued.
How could you get into Stanford without taking notes? That's impressive.
That is true.
And so then what happened from there? I assume it got better from there. So what happened from there?
So I think the next step here was finding housing for the last year. So then there's a little bit of a musical chair kind of going on. And she probably knows the more about this whole story. But there were 3 spaces available in this awesome house. So she realized that if she could offer this up to me and my rooming team, then something interesting might happen. And that's what happened.
It worked.
That's right. It worked well.
This is a little bit of trivia. That house, it's in Palo Alto, actually is the Social Network house. So we were there like 10 years before it was the Social Network. And we moved our engineering interns into it right after they moved out.
Now, are you saying this is the house that was used in the movie, or the original Facebook house?
It was the Facebook house.
It was the Facebook house with the zip line and everything.
That's it.
Yeah, we have a whole other story about that.
Okay. Yeah. the untold stories of Silicon Valley.
Yes, exactly.
Tell us, did you intend to start a company? How did Medallia? Amy, tell us how Medallia got started.
So I actually went to business school. I had a really checkered past. Before I went to business school, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I worked on Capitol Hill. I wanted to start a company, but I had 0 business experience. So I actually wrote on my application to Stanford that I either wanted to start a company or go into marketing. And I really wanted to start a business. I had no idea what, but yes, I had always had that intention.
And so where did the idea come from? Where was the first insight?
You mentioned that we were working for a consulting company, and we were traveling all the time, frequent guests at this one hotel. We looked like super loyal customers, and we were bad-mouthing this hotel to everybody, mostly because it was very hard for me to get a non-smoking room. And I just didn't like, rooms filled with the smell of smoke. And the internet was coming into its own, and we saw an opportunity to help these hotels really understand how they can deliver a better customer experience. And I think they were assuming that they were, because we were such good, loyal guests.
And did you decide automatically that you were going to work together, or was this something that just kind of, just happened naturally, or how did that start?
So I think we lived in Europe at the time. So we actually lived first in London, and then for a few years in Norway, and we wanted to move back. And since we'd been students here, we liked it here, and we were completely aware of what was going on. It seemed like this incredible time. It was like, the gold rush is going on, and why aren't you there, right? So it was this magical moment in time that you realized that sitting back and reading about it in the newspaper was the wrong thing to do. And so, we packed our bags and moved over there, our 2-year-old in tow, and, very much intending to make something happen.
So we do have different memories of this, and I do have a distinct memory of sitting in a cafe in Oslo with all my girlfriends saying, should I work with my husband? And everyone around the table, and come on, if you're married, think about this, everyone around the table went, so I clearly didn't listen to them.
Yeah, and so you come back. It's the spring of 2001, right? And this kind of builds to you guys had it's really a key part of your whole story. But September 10th, 2001, you meet with what could then be one of your first customers. Tell us about that experience. Tell us what happened.
So, I mean, just to so what we did is that we had decided that we wanted to build a company that looked much like Medallia looked now, but then with an additional piece to it, it looks much like, Yelp or TripAdvisor looks now. So we wanted to do both sides, right? Right now, we are helping companies become awesome on Yelp and TripAdvisor, right? And that time, we wanted to be Yelp and TripAdvisor too. So we were writing and really we decided to raise money. So we're writing a business plan. We were, talking to customers, validating that we had the right concept, that we would have customers and so on. And so we were, of course, excellent at writing slides, and so we worked really hard on that. And then we did get in touch with a lot of potential customers, and one of them actually was a company called Hilton Hotels, and we met with them September 10th. We had put together what we thought was a kick-ass. Can I say that?
You just did.
Really awesome demo, right? It was awesome. And it had, we're very analytical. So it had lots of awesome analytics and all kinds of cool things. And so we thought they were going to love it. And they actually did like it. They loved it a lot. And so we came back and we were pretty energized. And then, of course, the next day was September 11th. And that was not a good day for anybody, right? So I remember us just sitting and that, by the way, that was the only customer that was truly interested. So we sat there in our office, downtown Palo Alto, an old dentist office. Had a little sort of a, 12-inch TV we were watching, and we came back the next day, and then we were talking about what do we do now? Because, because the office costs money, and clearly no customers are this is not what they think about right now. And our idea of raising money was probably going to go out the window, because no VCs were going to want to give us any money. They were going to be saving their own customers and their own investments already, right? And so that was the day that we actually eventually got a phone call from Hilton Hotels, and they said to us, there was actually not them, it was one person. It was John. I still remember his name. He was a very interesting guy. John was a very passionate person. He's the kind of, if you guys are an entrepreneur, you got to find your Johns. So this guy knows that something has to change. And he was not politically savvy. So he was not even thinking about being afraid of making change. And he then, of course, got himself terminated a few years later for not being super political.
Over your product?
And that was actually not our product. So we'd like to say that actually people build careers over our product. But, there were some other issues there. But he's awesome, totally awesome guy. So he had decided that the world needed to move on. I mean, it made sense. Like, we could communicate for free instantaneously. We could deliver wonderful web pages with all kinds of insights to, everywhere in the company so that everybody could see what was going on real time. And then what they were doing, most companies were writing and sending out, using the US Postal Service, these super long surveys that took months to get back that people didn't fill out and eventually ended up with some numbers in a PDF, right? It was terrible. And he realized this needed to change. And here we came from this place called Silicon Valley, and he believed, because we were from there, that we could actually program. And we had right? And so we proved it also with a wonderful demo. Now, sadly, of course, fortunately, they didn't really do a lot of good due diligence on that actual product, because it was static HTML kind of linked together and saved on our hard drives. But they basically called us and said, look, if you guys are willing to do it for free, a test, we want to see how it performs compared to our old solution, and realize everybody at this company gets their bonus based on,
satisfaction.
Exactly. It's super important. So we can't I would totally get fired if this thing here doesn't work. So I need to test it, and if it works, we'll give you a shot at the contract. So it was not a simple decision to go forward, but we eventually, we had to think about it, but we ended up doing it.
Amy, take us back to that moment in September 2001, and the whole business world has stopped.
Right.
And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs at that time where a lot of their business just completely collapsed. And here you are just getting started, and it's, two people in a dentist's office. It's you and your husband and your whole family is kind of on the line here. What was going through your head? What kept you engaged? What kept you at very lucrative jobs. You know, you were very employable with Stanford and Harvard on your resumes. What kept you from giving up in that moment when no one would have faulted you for going back to what was safe?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think we knew that we really wanted to do it. We really believed in the product. We really like, we envision a world where more places are like Nordstrom and fewer places are like the DMV. That's a great world, right? And we were passionate about the idea that the internet could help us solve that problem. And we were really behind it. And it just for context, you know, when we graduated from business school about 5 years earlier, everybody was doing what business school students always do, 30% to consulting, 30% to iBanking, 30% to general management, and 10% other. By the time we came back during the dot-com bubble, everybody was in startups. Whether they were startup people or entrepreneurs or not, everybody was doing it. And so a lot of people left the startup world post 9/11, but the people who were truly entrepreneurial, they kind of had the grit. They kind of stuck, in my experience, they kind of stuck with it, or they found a new business or whatever. I've heard, you know, many stories. So I think for us, we were passionate about the idea, and ultimately we were entrepreneurial. We weren't doing it because it was the cool thing to do at that time. We were doing it because we really believed in what we were doing.
At one point, it becomes fun as well, right? Because you have this thing, hey, I want to finish this thing. It's like when you were a kid, you want to finish your painting. You know, you want to finish your Lego or whatever you were doing, or your model sets. Some of your parents come and tell you it's time to go to bed. You say, no, I'm not done, right? You want to conclude it. And so I think for us, once we got started on building the product, we wanted to see it through. We wanted to see people use it. And then if they didn't like it, it was okay, and we could do something else. But then comes the ultimate drug of them all, right? Then you give it to them, and then they like it, you know? Now what do? Now you have no choice. Of course you're going to want that to happen again and again and again, and you can't stop, right? And it's one of those things where I've so much enjoyed working with great developers and great designers, is that you have this ability to create these wonderful things, and you can scale them like crazy. So many people can now use them. It's the closest that I think that we can truly get to superpowers, right? And you know, anyway, we got hooked.
So you run this test with Hilton, and what happens in the test?
We think we've nailed it because they loved it. And Hilton, and we've learned to love this and appreciate this about Hilton, but they're very loyal to their partners. So they said, we're giving our current vendor a chance to replicate what you just did. So we had to hang on and wait to see what happened with the existing vendor. In the meantime, we did get other customers. Yep. So it wasn't totally dire. But that was, you know, you feel like if you prove it, and they loved it. They loved it. And then, anyway, but we ended up.
You waited how long until they made that decision?
Remember.
So we you know, September 12th.
Yep.
We started. We ran the pilot actually through February of the next year. That was longer than anticipated. No pay.
When you had to build the product too, right? I mean, the product.
Yeah, that's right, because we were faking it, right? Yeah. So we knew that. So that was what we were saying. Hey, did we actually want to build this thing instead of just the idea, right? And we did. So we worked like, you know, 80, 100-hour, you know, weeks. Amazing developer, just super speed. End of February, they gave us the message. And then they gave us the decision in May. Well, one of the cool things that we had done is that we pre-negotiated the price. So we said, look, if we're going to do this for free, then we got to agree the going forward price if you choose to continue. So we don't want, right? So they actually stuck by that. Really, so they knew what our price was. And it was partially because we realized that if we didn't do putting a big price on it, meant that at least they were serious. They weren't wasting our time. So either way, May, we got the go ahead. And then what they said, and we were super excited, and the next sentence they said, and we want to implement so that we're ready next year. And we were like, oh no, you know, my bank account is already, you know, not looking good.
So negotiate payment from contract signing.
Yeah, we didn't do that. So we got paid from delivery, which unfortunately, you know.
Started in January.
That's right, yeah.
2003.
That's right. So January 1st, 2003, we really had but it was a pivotal thing because we were losing money. So of course we were paying ourselves much, but then we were at that point we were actually a profitable company, and so then we actually had an infinite runway, which is awesome with bootstraps, right? You don't have to worry about how long is your runway because it's infinite, right?
And so you're doing this deal with Hilton, which is really fascinating because it takes you 18 months to go from kind of this meeting where they agreed to it, so you're probably doing all sorts of legwork even before that. So maybe it's 21 months or 24 months to actually implementing this, and it just feels like, I mean, so many times along that period, you could have said, throwing your hands up in the air, you could have said, these people are impossible to deal with, this is taking too long, we're going to run out of money, we're going to focus on the customers that are actually paying us or that look like they're going to pay us, and you stuck with it. And I mean, I think most entrepreneurs, they don't have that kind of time. Time is like, of course we all know how precious time is, but your startup just needs time to kind of grow and get started, right? Like the seed just needs time to germinate and to make something happen. And did you feel like that, I mean, did that keep you in the game longer? If you hadn't had Hilton, would that have affected how long you gave it, or did that kind of like, did that keep you going at times?
I felt like, for a little context, we had sold our house in Europe and we had made some amount of money on it. So our time was how long we still had money in the bank account. And I remember doing all kinds of things to make sure that we extended that time, like buying my kids' clothes at yard sales and not buying an electric whipped cream beater and whipping cream by hand because I didn't want to spend the $10 at Walmart. I mean, really, like really saving, scrimping. In Silicon Valley, it's not easy. But here's the other thing. We were so passionate about the product and what it could do, and seeing how Hilton was using it. So I get really sad when I see entrepreneurs running after an idea that they think will make a lot of money, but they're not personally, passionate about it. You need to be passionate about it because it will get hard, and you need to believe in your product and believe in what the value that it brings. And that was super helpful.
It was also for me. I think it was. I mean, just to be clear, I had no frustration at all with our first with Hilton. I thought it was an awesome company. I loved the people on the other side. I totally get why they wanted to wait, right? And so, just even talking to them and working on the product and all this kind of stuff to me was super energizing. And it was great to know that at the end of the day you did have, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. It was just a matter of bridging to it. And we knew that we were already getting, signals from the marketplace that there was more things to be had, right? So once we had that, there was no doubt.
You're in Silicon Valley. You decide to bootstrap this company. It's 2003. Originally, you said earlier you couldn't raise the money. It was just the worst climate ever for raising money. But eventually, over the next few years, I mean, that changed, I imagine. As you start to you're profitable, you're hiring people, you're getting buzz, you've got these big customers that are in trend. As you said, like these people are very loyal to their vendors. What kept you on that bootstrapping mentality? What kept you on that path? Why not kind of get the big, Sand Hill Road dollar signs in your eyes and do that in 2005 or 2006 or? Why did you all do that for so long?
I can go on this one. I think, for a long time we evaluated it, and it was really helpful to have come back here in 2001 and see everybody drinking the Kool-Aid, and like all your peers are worth $10 million on paper because their stock options just, were, and it was all sort of funny money. And what you realize that there were a lot of good ideas in 2001 that were ahead of their time, and some of them have been reborn later. But I think the lesson we took away from that, watching this happen to our friends, was when you see a true market opportunity, that's the time to go. Don't just go because you can get the money, because once you get the money, investors have certain expectations, and if the market isn't ripe to match those expectations, you're putting yourself into a really difficult situation. So just at about the time that we were starting to see the market open up, that's when Lehman Brothers collapsed, and so we had the Great Recession. And then it was really pre-IPO Facebook and social media where we saw an explosion of demand for our product, and that became the time that we ended up getting money.
Tell us, I want to talk about what you've seen from customers and thinking about customers. Tell us just, what does Medallia do? Give us the synopsis of what you do, and then let's talk about the customer experience.
Sure. Do you can you think of a company that you use that you really don't like?
It's funny because I was literally at the DMV this morning for 2 hours. So I'm like, that's resonating with me. Can we use that as an example?
You could, although typically the private sector one.
A company that I really don't like.
Are you making him go on record?
No, he can just think about it if he wants to.
You got me on the spot. I really don't like Base Camp.
Oh, that's pretty good. Now,
I use it a lot.
So think about everybody, all of you guys, think of a company that you have in your life that you wish really weren't there, right? Right? And then you think of a company that's in your life that you think is fantastic and that you actually have recommended to a lot of other people. You want kind of your friends and maybe your siblings or whatever to use, right? And I think especially if you are dealing with bigger companies, one of the things that I realized that it was kind of when you're sitting on the outside and you're sort of a victim of it, oftentimes you think, well, they're just because they're evil, right? And as it turns out, when you actually try to work with these people, which I did for a few years, it turns out they're actually not evil at all. They're just really hard to do this stuff, right? The thing is, if they could say, look, my company, my awful company that people rather would not deal with, if I could make that to be like the awesome company that everybody recommends to their friends by pushing a button, then the CEO, the CMO, the head of sales, the CFO, they would all push the button, right? Why? It kind of makes sense, right? Because we live in a market economy. So when you actually have companies that people love, they tend to do much better. And then we've got all kinds of stats on this stuff, right? Like you just look at the market cap of companies that are on top in terms of, like customer experience in their industry, and they reliably kill, they drive market share, market cap. Our customers that on their own are a pre-screened group, right? Because they already have chosen to spend a lot of money on the customer experience. Even for them, the ones that are ahead in the class, the ones that truly have customers are super happy, within the last 3-4 years, their market cap have increased by twice of what the laggards have done, right? So if you compare that to what it costs to buy the system, obviously it's nothing, right? So I think that's the reason why we exist. Companies get big. When you're small and artisan, maybe you make sushi, you can be as one chef. You look at every little thing that you make and you can make it awesome. If you have 1,000 people trying to make something together, then people lose track of what's going on. And then the end product, the customer does not lose track of this stuff. I know exactly what I think about most companies that I interact with, but the people inside don't know how they can actually make it great. And so that's kind of the problem we're trying to solve. And it's really a pretty simple problem. There are 3 things that need to happen. Number 1, the company needs to understand what's going on. And so you need to capture reliably what your customers already know, but you don't. Put it together and get it to the right people that have accountability and the ability to make change, right? So that's kind of number 1. The other thing that you need to do is that you need to actually then figure out what to do. You need to do something, and that typically comes in 2 flavors. It's being responsive to the customer. If you're that sushi chef and the person doesn't like the piece, you will probably fix it, right? You'll go deal with it right there because the customer is important to you, and you need to do the same thing. But it's hard to do because big companies are big and bumbly and they tend to stomp on customers. Not because they want to, because they kind of just do it. They don't really see you. Another thing they tend to do is to stomp on their own employees for the same reason. It's not they're evil, they just don't understand what they're doing. So we're advocating putting a sensor system in where they see people and they see customers, so they can now make an active decision to stomp on them if they want to. Of course, most companies won't want to do that. They want to then do what we think they should do, which is to go fix it. 2 things to do then. You need to go in customer by customer, individual by individual, making sure that they get what they paid for. And that's how you build a reputation. And that's how you build long-term value, right? The second thing that you do is that you figure out what processes don't work, what stores don't work, those little things that you have to create. What do you, which ones are those do you go innovate and fix, right?
It's almost in some way this kind of lean methodology at every single level.
Exactly
of
what
the,
it is. It is, the world has
customer
become
experience.
the world has become a place where everybody's a product manager, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is iterating, and everybody then needs feedback to figure out what they thought was going to work. Well, did it actually work for the customers, right? You have a hypothesis, you have a creative person, you think you have a vision, you try it, and then you see, and then you keep going. That's exactly what it is.
I'd love to talk a little bit about, teach us a little bit about the customer experience, like this idea of you deal with huge customers, small customers. You mentioned that, your company's mentioned that some of these customers have tens of thousands of users using their product and it scales all the way down. When is it appropriate to send a survey? When is it appropriate? Like, are there best practices for some of these things? If I'm a startup and I'm two people in a dentist's office and I'm trying to get feedback from my customers, like, is it just, we're taught to follow the lean methodology, we're taught to do all these different things, do customer development. Are there times where it is appropriate? Are there times where it isn't appropriate? Teach us a little bit about what you've learned from these customers about getting feedback.
Let me take that. I'll take it.
I can start. Look, we're not just all about surveys. We're really trying to capture what the customer is saying and how they're saying it, and that has changed dramatically in the years that we've been in business. So we do things like scrape social media, because there's an awful lot of information there. We can pull in data from transaction systems. In terms of surveying, we have, depending on the type of customer and the type of company that is our customer and their customers, we have different recommendations. A general trend, in my opinion, is that we're moving away from surveys, and we're certainly moving away from long surveys and into short textual things. And so what you want to do really is to think about having a conversation with a customer rather than extracting data from them. I think that's where the world is going.
So the way that I see this is that the old world of doing lengthy, in-depth, long questionnaires, that sort of, that world, it will still exist, but it'll probably be for people that you pay or people that are very interested in helping you in whatever cause you're trying to research, right? If somebody has spent some time in a retail store, it's not reasonable for them to spend time on, filling out 50 questions that probably nobody's ever going to do anything about, right? So we think that the key thing is ask a customer how it went if you're prepared to do something about it, right? When they say it didn't work very well. If you're actually going to read everything, if you're going to share it with employees, if you're actually going to do something about it, then you ask. If you're not ready to do that, then don't bother, right? And that's the key thing for us. It's the action that drives whether you ask or not. Then I think that it's humans are very social, right? And they totally understand what the difference between somebody who's writing you an email that you want to respond to and what is spam, right? And so I think that's the key thing. It's a social contract. People are kind of programmed to respond. If you ask me, if I go out and talk to you, it's really odd for you not to say anything back to me. It's an odd behavior that humans don't like, right? And I think that, unfortunately, companies
That's our
tend to be
experience with big companies.
Well, that's what it is. They talk to you and they don't
On
care
one
when you
side.
respond. They're like they have moved on, right? So it's
Right.
super annoying. So I think that we think the companies need to stop being autistic and kind of start, right? That's our advocate, and that's what we advocate.
Amy, talk to us. Tell us a little bit about the culture at Medallia and how you hired the early team members, how you built the early team, what type of values you have, what is important, what's important to your company in that
Having
regard.
trouble with my microphone, I apologize. I do a little, we have an onboarding at Medallia. We're known for our culture, and I talk about this. When I started, when we started, I thought about the worst place I had ever worked and the best place I had ever worked. And what was really ironic is that they were the same place. And so it was the best place because my immediate colleagues were amazing. It was the worst place because the senior management was really dysfunctional. I won't do my little shtick on that, which a lot of people from Medallia know, but they were dysfunctional. And And so I thought, and arrogant and kind of jerks. And so I thought if we could hire those type of smart, driven people and have no jerks, that was all you needed for culture. And then what I learned over time is that you need more than that. And what we really want to create is a place where people show up and they learn every day. And I just saw a quote from Buckminster Fuller about humans are the only species that learn most from their mistakes. And so we need to create, and especially if you're in a startup, you are by definition creating new products, new industries. You're going to make missteps, and you've got to be in a place where you can talk openly about them, learn from them, and just learn faster. And the opposite of that is a very political environment where you have to document your successes. And so we spend a lot of time creating a culture that feels less political because we are trying to be open about, our learning journeys. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
okay.
It does. Describe the values of Medallia. What, and where do those come from? Most people say the values come from the founders, but what in terms of the values, what do you think resonates the most with the people that join the company, and how that attracts them?
Yeah, I think people feel like it's a really authentic place. They really like their colleagues. They're smart and driven, but they've got their back. What we talk about is something called growth mindset, which is a concept by Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist at Stanford. And the idea there is that your talents are not fixed. You can develop them through effort, and it leads to a whole bunch of behaviors such as honestly talking about your setbacks, engaging everybody around you to help you get better, honestly talking about what's working in your teams. And so what we find is and our board tells us this, we improve faster, we learn faster. I'm not sure if that's covering it. You kind of have to feel it. It's got a really cool positive energy though.
But I think the key, the cool thing, and Amy deserves a ton of credit for this, I think that the key, what I really bond with is this idea of learning, and it's speed of learning that is the key thing, right? And when you really, and the cool thing is it's what we want our customers to do as well, right? Being able to to learn what's working and what's not working for your customers is also an act of learning and then trying things and see if it works and keep going. When you actually take it down, it ends up at the team, and eventually it ends up at an individual, right? And it's that act of individual learning, and then of course, driven by this idea that you're on a team, and the team is a competitive team, and we have to perform, right? And so we're a place where we talk a lot about learning, but it's also a place that has to perform, and so there's pressure. And we want only people in the company that's committed to personal learning. So that can be really hard because sometimes if you already think you learn everything because you just nailed it and there's nothing more for you to learn, then it's probably going to be a difficult place for you. If you're somebody who's truly leaning in and knows that there are areas that you are not great at, and you're truly, it doesn't matter that somebody trains you because you're going to find ways to train yourself, then it's an awesome place, right? To me, that's how I would love to live my life, and I love the way that that Amy here would help create this place.
We're going to take some questions from the audience in just a second, so get those ready. And our hashtag is Startup Grind or SG Women, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But I want to just ask you all, it's so hard. It's so hard to run a startup, and you all are not only running a startup together, co-founded a startup together, but you're also married, which, at Startup Grind, we usually only interview the people who, the married couples that we interview are like the ones, who have survived it. But
the other side will be much more fun, I think.
The Eventbrite founders or the House founders, or there's a few other examples, but
Cisco, VMware.
How did you do that? Honestly, how you wake up in the morning, you wake up together, you go into work, you spend all day at work together, you're doing all these different things, you're trying to get through all these complicated, difficult issues. You finish the day, you go back together. It's like, how do you keep that sort of balance between your family and your work? And did you ever reach stress points where you said, hey, this isn't worth it, we're going to ruin our family if we're not careful? I mean, were there difficult points in there that you had to figure out? Tell us about how you managed that, Amy.
Yeah, I have two answers. One is going back to when everybody gave the thumbs down. I actually did a lot of research. And what I found in the research that I read was that it works best with co-founders if they have really complementary skill sets and they have clearly defined roles. And so we have very complementary skill sets. So I think when you're in a situation where your skill sets are very similar, you may, I think it's more of an issue because you'll be bumping into each other more. I would almost want to ask my children. I think they do a mean impersonation of us talking about work during the day. And I feel like it hasn't been a problem for us, but I wonder in years to come whether we'll find out from our children that that work never stopped.
There might be, bills from various counselors and down the road to have to deal with this. But I actually think, for me, I clearly there are pros and cons, right? It is difficult, and you will get into a situation where you talk about work too much, and it's harder to get kind of an away space for yourself, right? So I think that, Amy's pretty good about reading and kind of getting out of the now a little bit. I do other things, but it is definitely a risk, right? The complementary skill set thing is incredibly important, right? For us specifically, we just know stuff and know how to do things that the other party doesn't know how to do, and both are very important here. Now, you could probably find that in the co-founder. In some ways, a co-founder is kind of like a married person to you if you're right. So we just kind of doubled up a little bit here, right?
It's like a polygamous thing.
Kind of like that. Kind of like that. Yeah.
Great. Let's give a big round of applause for Amy and Borge. Good question.